Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗧 is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗧.
Dr. 𝗏𝗏𝗧.
Dr. Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗧.
Dr. Doreen 𝗏𝗏𝗧 is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Sarah wants to know, hi Dr. Doreen and Shannon, my twins are now 3.5 years old and are working on an Intraverbal Fluency program, which is really amazing, Sarah.
Yes.
That makes me want to cry for you because that's so
it's
impressive.
so exciting.
They usually have a target, i.e. a number of questions to answer per minute. I've noticed that he gets very anxious if he gets any question wrong, and he will insist to repeat to get his target. I am conscious that this may impact him later in life. Am I overthinking this?
No, you're not overthinking this. The ABA folks who are working with your kid might tell you that you're overthinking it, but you're not. A lot of our kids have a slower response time, or as I said earlier, this came up in our conversation a little bit ago, which is teaching our kids to kind of select the right answer.
And only be right.
And only be right and not be able to make mistakes. And I think that it is something worth discussing with your supervisor of your program and saying, I just don't want him to develop anxiety. Yep. And I really just want to either sometimes like give him more time to answer, or if speed is not the issue, then it becomes very important to mock always being perfect. So like, let's talk about that for a minute, because there's a lot of kids who actually do learn, and actually part of anxiety, by the way, is becoming more and more obsessive, right? Developing OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder. So we become like very just like everything has to be exactly right, everything has to be proper. If I go over the line in any possible way, I'm gonna completely fail. And that is what we see a lot happening with our kids. Some of our kids become perfectionists as a result. And so it becomes really important to do fun activities where you both make mistakes and then just mock it and say, oh, isn't that funny? I made a mistake. I can make mistakes. Or doing things that are like not the right thing. So for instance, if you're coloring something, being messy and going over the lines, right? And then just saying, that's okay, I can do that, that's all right, I don't have to, like right now, I don't have to focus on it. Or lots of things like that which are demonstrating imperfection. And to show that in life, there's imperfection. And that's super, super important because it allows your child to realize that even if they make a mistake, or even if things are imperfect, they can move forward. Yeah. And otherwise, what happens is sometimes our kids freeze because they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want things to be imperfect in any way. So I remember when my kids were growing up, and they were very, very young, I used to get them together every night, and the three of us would have sort of like an hour, or the four of us, a half an hour or an hour of talking about things that were on their minds or whatever it was. And I had noticed that, and this is very common, by the way, that your last child is like completely free and doesn't worry about anything, right. The youngest, right? Because they have the other children to kind of protect them and guide them. Yeah. Whereas your oldest, the firstborn, is usually a little bit more rule governed and anxious, right. And always trying to do the right thing, because when they were born, they didn't have another sibling to kind of protect them. So I would sit my kids down and go very Freudian, right? Because Freud has this whole thing that talks about the id, the ego, and the superego. And it's a very interesting dynamic that all of us have. The id is our free spirit, like our wild side. The superego is this. It's the parent, the conscience, the right or wrong. And the ego is supposed to be the result of the two coming together. So there's, times where we know that we have to follow the rules. That's our superego guiding us. And then times when we know it's okay to let free, to let loose, and that's our id. And the ideal is if those two get along with each other and we end up having, a balance in our lives of both of those things, both cognitively. And so I used to teach that to my kids. Of course, I give them funny names, not id, ego, and superego, but I think that's what you're talking about, and I think it's super important. You should sit down with your supervisor and just say, hey, can we also teach my child that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's okay to not be perfect, and that goes a long way.
They asked us to model that too as parents, that we started doing things where I'd go, oh, I made a mistake, and then I'd go, oh, well.
And laugh about it,
and laugh, and my husband would go, oh, she made a mistake, it's okay.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do something different.
Right.
And then they taught my son, because he was always afraid to say the wrong thing, and sometimes that would mean he wouldn't say anything.
Exactly.
So they taught him how to say, when he would say something and somebody would go, what? Like his peers, he would go, oh, I made a word mistake.
Yes.
And then...
And that was it.
And that was it. And it was like, oh, okay, go on, now you have another chance at it.
Perfect.
And then we would watch the Olympics and go, oh, look, somebody made a mistake, but they're going to do it again.
Yes.
So that, that it become a thing. And sometimes they don't get to do it again.
Yes.
And they didn't get the medal. Oh, that's a bummer.
Exactly.
But look, they're fabulous still. So lots of examples for that. Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.